Okay, now when we talk about market analysis, a lot of times people get hung up on thinking that we need to do a whole lot of research to become successful investors. And the reality is that if we just go out and do anything in the field, you will automatically be doing market analysis. For example, one of the first things that we do with clients is we'll talk to real estate agents. And one of the first questions we ask, for example, if I go into a new city, how much experience do I have in that city? 0, possibly. And so what we'll do is we'll call up an agent and we'll just ask them, we'll just say, hey, my name's Greg, I'm new in town, and I wanted to see if you work with investors, and a lot of times we've done some research beforehand, so we know that they do. And I just ask them, what is the best price point for investors here? What are the best neighborhoods? What kind of location would be best for me as an investor? And would you be willing to show me some of these properties? And within about 30 seconds, what are they going to tell you? Well, you need to be in this area. I'm working with some investors in this corner of town. The price point that's moving the fastest seems to be the 150 to 200 range. If you get over 250, it's taken 6 months to sell. If you get under 125, you're dealing with gang zones and you don't want to be in those areas anyway, and you're not going to be safe. What did you just do? You just did a whole bunch of market analysis and market study, and you're actually getting to work in the field. So you're not doing the theoretical type of study, which everybody kind of thinks. They start thinking, if I'm doing market analysis, it's bookwork, isn't it? And what I would present to you is that it's not. If you go out and get in the field, you will automatically be doing the market analysis. Another example of that is when we were in Charlotte, we went out on the second day and we started looking at properties. And one of the multiple listing service sheets that we had a property address. So we show up at the address, and it turns out that the property was occupied. And we're thinking, well, there's a house for sale here, but the address we're looking at is here, and something was just out of whack with the paperwork. And so we go up and knock on one of the doors, and a lady answers, and we says, hey, did you buy this house? And she said, no, we just moved in, though. And we said, okay, well, what's going on? And she said, we're renting. Oh, really? Well, do you mind us asking how much you're renting for? And she said, oh, yeah, we're on Section 8. You guys familiar with Section 8 housing? We're on Section 8 housing. We're paying $850 a month. We pay $150 of that, and the government pays the rest. What'd you just do? Market analysis. Just by asking somebody a couple simple questions. And so we don't want to go out there and think, okay, we need to do a bunch of book work in order to figure out what's going on in the market. What we need to do is get out and actually get in the field and start talking to people, and you're automatically going to start absorbing all the information you need to be successful. And so now, not only do we know about a Section 8 tenant, we know what the market rents are for rent in that neighborhood. We know if we buy the property for the listed amount, are we going to be able to cover the mortgage and the expenses on that, just off of a 2-minute conversation with that tenant. And so, so that's something we need to get involved with as quickly as possible. Now, another thing that you want to pay attention to is obviously the articles, but we got to be careful in terms of the media articles and the news articles that are out there. I've been reading these articles obviously for years, as I'm sure you guys have been, and the problem you run into is that they always tend to have quite a bit of spin to them. And are you guys familiar with media very much and how they operate? What do?
They give the information that they want you to get.
Exactly. And what do they do to that information? They dramatize it. Okay, we were just in Egypt and Israel a couple months ago, and so some of our tour guides, they were actually involved with all the protests that were going on in Egypt. I mean, they actually got shot with rubber bullets and all sorts of stuff. We've seen some crazy pictures from them. But I've been talking to them about what actually is going on over there versus what we're seeing in the media. And what do you think the difference is? It's night and day. You know, and the reason is because our media, it's a business. And what sells? Drama. Okay? Hype and drama. So anything that they report on is going to be hyped up and it's going to be dramatized. So let's relate that to your real estate investing. What's the biggest thing in the news right now? Foreclosures. And what do they tell you about foreclosures? Foreclosures are up 200%, 300%, all these huge numbers. Well, do you know what the regular percentage was about 5 or 6 years ago?
Really low.
1%. Okay? So foreclosures were about 1% of all the mortgages that were out there. They don't tell you that 30% of all the houses that are out there are owned free and clear. That's an interesting stat, right? And only 1% of them are going into foreclosure. So over the last couple of years, the economy goes into a major meltdown. We have a huge collapse. Foreclosures go up 300%, which means what? Now they're 3 or 4%. I mean, come on, people. It's like, if we go out there, for every 100 houses, there's 97 that aren't in foreclosure, and there's 3 that are. So, yeah, it looks dramatic when you look at the percentages, but you've got to learn how to read the information so you're not getting sucked into, the media hype. I actually had a guy who called. He was wanting to come to this event, and he says, well, I don't think you can invest because, everybody's going in foreclosure. Nobody's buying anything. And I'm thinking, and I gave him that analogy, and he's not here. Because he thinks you can't invest. That's insane, isn't it? And so we've got to understand how to look at the information and be careful with the information, and that's something that we oftentimes do as we're going through these teaching arrangements is we'll oftentimes go through articles. People say, well, how would you analyze this article? And a lot of times you just say, well, they're looking at one side, or they only talk to one individual. For example, back when the condo boom was happening down in Florida, they would interview some of the condo association management team members, and do you think their information is going to be biased? Definitely. So you've got people around the country learning about the Florida condo market by somebody who's involved with the condo market, and do you think they're getting good information? They're getting one side of the story. And so what we need to do, anytime we're doing any kind of market analysis, I try to get at least 3 different sources. I don't care where it comes from, but whether you're dealing with a real estate agent, a mortgage broker, a banker, or anything, they're always going to tell you stuff. And when we call real estate agents, a lot of times they'll say, well, things aren't moving right now. Okay, that may be their experience. Could that be a legitimate piece of information? Yeah. So we'd want to dig a little bit further and say, okay, why is it that you feel like things aren't moving? Why is it that you can't get things to move? Maybe you're a bad agent. You don't say that to them, but that could be the reason. Or it could be they're working in the wrong area. Or it could be they're working with the wrong buyers. There's a variety of reasons why that might be their perception. But I'm going to go out and talk to 10 other people and find out what their perception is. And over time, the more people you come across and the more sources of information you get, the more you can kind of triangulate and see where the actual reality is versus what fringe people are thinking about the market. And so that's what we want to do with our analysis, is make sure we're triangulating as much as possible. Because I don't trust a real estate agent to give me all the best comps, right? Comparable sales, familiar with comps?
Yeah, when you said it fully, I understand.
Yeah, okay, so when you ask them for comparable sales, do you think they have an ulterior motive to just show you the highest comparable sales? Yeah, because they're going to make a higher commission. Okay, so that's why I'm always looking at maybe tax records. Are tax records accurate? No. But you can tell after a while. I actually made an offer on a house in Salt Lake off of the tax record assessments because I'd been analyzing it in relation to actual market values for a long period of time. So for a period of time, I would check the tax assessment, and then I would check what the comparable sales were. And I started to recognize tax assessments were running 12 to 15% below actual market values. So when we looked at an estate sale, we went in there and I didn't have time to get comparables from an agent. So I jump online and look at the tax assessment, and what can I tell now? If I know what the tax assessment is, I know the real market value is 12 to 15% higher than that, and I can make an accurate offer. And we got that property under contract. And so that's why getting a lot of information from a variety of sources, from places like Trulia, Zillow, you guys are probably familiar with those ones, right? These are really good information sites. You can look up trends. We're going to go through another one here in a few minutes that's kind of more of a crystal ball in terms of looking into the future as far as what you can look at. There's some really good information on some of the government sites that you can predict market trends and different things, and we'll go through that in a second. If you're looking for rental stats, we talked about one way of getting that information through just talking to people in the field. One thing we had to do in Texas, we're trying to figure out how much we can offer on the property, but we didn't know what the rental rates were. We didn't know the averages. We knew what that property was bringing in, but we didn't know what it was all across the board for that market. So we contacted the Central Florida Apartment Association. And within about 20 minutes, we had all the information we needed in terms of rental rates, time frames. The Apartment Association in Salt Lake, for example, they put out a quarterly newsletter. And our real estate investment club meets at the Salt Lake Apartment Association building. And every time we go in there, at least 4 times a year, they give us a little brochure, and it has all of the rental rates, has the occupancy rates for different parts of the city. It has permits that have been taken out for any multi-unit housing. And so, and with the permits, it tells you what that housing is going to be dedicated to. Is it going to be veterans housing? Is it going to be senior housing? Is it going to be low-income housing? What kind of housing is it going to be? Does that give you some good information in terms of what properties you buy or who your target market's going to be for renters? Definitely. Because a lot of times those big apartment complex owners, they've done a lot of that research that maybe we don't have the money to do.